Aloha, this is Clint Hansen with Maui Real Estate Radio on the KAOI radio group. You can listen to this wherever you get your podcast. Of course, you can get us also on our social media platforms and tune in at the KAOI radio group every Monday morning. Today, I have my co-host, Kevin Watkins of Aloha Rental Management. Say hello, Kevin.
Aloha from Maui to everybody listening.
And Byron Yap, of course, my other co-host. He's been with me the longest. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Oh, he's got the mute on. So one of the things that's important, and whenever you're doing these, is you end up having your mute button on. So please go ahead and unmute yourself. I definitely see it's got a little bit of a frozen thing going on here. Uh-oh. I'll probably start the show over.
Okay, well, I can chime in and say I'm Kevin with Aloha Rental Management. We do long-term rentals exclusively with our division for residents of Maui. We do have some team that work on Oahu, but we're mostly on Maui, providing housing for solutions for homeowners and housing for our wonderful tenants in the community.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We do have some guests with us today, and that's Paula and Brian. They are longtime clients of mine, and they've been clients of mine for, geez, over a decade now, and I've worked with them. So please introduce yourselves, Paula and Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm Paula, and good to see you, Clint.
Hey,
We've
good to
worked
see
with
you.
you now for a long time, and before that, you even helped our daughter buy a house. So
That's
we
right.
appreciate that.
My pleasure. So I remember selling her place. It was quite a transaction. It was a definite fixer-upper, but just like Brian, they are very handy. I remember a literal carpet of ticks on along the property. It was massive. So one of the things we had to do during the process was get the property fumigated. You guys did, they did a ton of work preparing it and getting it ready, but it ended up being the neighbor had a really bad pet situation, and I ended up getting help for them as well to take care of their animals and treat them and so on. But also, of course, your daughter and grandkids ended up selling that place a while ago and moving into the mainland for other job opportunities. But you guys, of course, in Lahaina, are Lahaina fire survivors, and you were fortunate enough to be traveling at that time. You want to talk a little bit about what you were doing and what your tenants ended up going through.
Okay, we were on the mainland visiting our daughter, the one that used to live here, and started hearing. Well, we'd been working with the solar company because our solar wasn't charging the batteries because the power was out that day. And so going back and forth with him and tried to get somebody to go over and help us reset the system, but it was so windy, it was hard to even get anyone to go out. So we knew it was bad from that standpoint. And what else did you ask? Sorry, you want to
Oh
just go
yeah,
through the
so
rest of it?
it's also really about, you know, that day in particular. And I mean, it's was fortunate enough for you guys not to be there, but you did share a video with me, and
Oh, yeah.
your tenant was just fabulous in trying to help save the property. You've known him for a very long time. Talk a little bit about what he ended up going through.
Well, that day, we kind of lived it through the phone because early that day we were on the phone. We knew there were some problems with our solar system. So Paul had been talking to a technician, like she says, trying to get it going. But throughout talking to that tenant and other ones, we soon found out that the fire had started. And uh, our tenant who lived downtown, he let us know that the fire was getting close and he had to go, right? And our other tenant who was further south in town at our house where we live, um, he is a young guy, and he thought he would he had been there for years, so it was his home. not just a place he lived. So, he thought he would maybe try and make a stand. And so he stayed there till 8 o'clock, until literally the house next door caught on fire with a garden hose. And by that time, if I remember correctly, um, the water had stopped. And one thing that was really crazy is he only had for transportation a motor scooter. And with the winds blowing 60 miles an hour and the town on fire, he knew he couldn't get out that way. And so
Mm.
he had the keys to my truck. So literally after our house started on fire, this is where I think some of the video you saw of him going in the house, and remembered he had to get his medications and a couple
Mm.
other things because he had just been, I don't know what his state of mind was at that point
It's
after trying to
panic,
put out the
it
fire
at
for a
that
couple
point in
hours and
time.
yeah, watching it come down the street.
Hmm.
But
And
he's a young guy, so like so many young people, he had his phone, and so he started videoing it. And I think that's the video you probably saw. One of the videos of the fire coming in the house and him grabbing his meds and running, filming at the same time. Not a thing to do, I would suggest.
Mhm. You
But then
know,
he got in our truck, and then he went and proceeded to get out of town and took some more videos. You might have seen those of our Toyota Tacoma driving through the streets of Lahaina while they burned. Our
wow.
neighborhood burned. So anyway, he got out of town, and there's more to that story because he had to work his way through town, driving over debris. I had, several punctures in my tire, the next day, that we had to, anyway.
And some
So
damage to the truck, but
some
nothing
damage to the
major.
truck, a little melty, and certain plastic items on the outside, but he got out. Um, but he was calling us all through that, like, the streets
Yeah.
on fire, and then he called us later, and he was, when he left and was trying to get out, he called us, and he was so traumatized from what he had seen. He had seen people running for his lives, and
Yeah. And that's the
so
thing, and I, of course, don't want to get too much into the
yeah,
actual trauma of the
yeah,
event because we all, have experienced it first person. It was tragic, but it really
yes,
does
yeah,
go to, the close relationships that you guys formed with your tenants. And I mean, the fact that they had, access to your private vehicles, shows that, you really treat them more like family. And you relied on them, you provided housing for them while simultaneously, it was a group effort to take care of the place. But, you know,
yes,
after that, in the preceding
yes,
month, it was obvious that it was a complete loss. You lost your home and same thing with your tenants.
right,
And it was hard for you to make decisions about what to do. And, I've, of course, one of the very first things is I reached out to you guys to see if I could help you at all. And if unfortunately, it was good to hear that you were in the mainland, that you were with family, you had your rig with you, which is beautiful camping van, and were able to, be relatively self-sufficient. And of course, what was it like when you got back on island, and how did you find a place to live since, you did not actually use FEMA resources like a lot of people did?
We tried to use FEMA resources, but we were declined.
Oh,
Um,
well, insurance,
so
right?
So was it
yeah, because
correct
we
that you couldn't get FEMA if you had insurance, and then you had to use your insurance company? Was that correct?
that's correct.
And what was
Yes.
that process like? Were they helpful or were they over inundated with the disaster?
The insurance, the big thing about insurance is they pay, but they don't provide. There's a difference between paying for a rental and finding a rental.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part about the Red Cross and FEMA both is they kept promising us that they would help and that it didn't matter if we had insurance or not. And so we kept going on that, thinking, okay, we wanted to wait until things settled down. So we had planned to come back in November to look at the house that that Clint, that you had found for us because we
Mhm.
needed to see it physically.
Yeah.
And that's when we started really pushing for what can you do for us while we're there, figuring we'd need to stay for a week or so to
Yeah.
look at it and think things through and process any paperwork.
Oh,
And
and just a little story and background. So when they were making the decision on what to do, reeling from the loss of their home, building, simply clearing the lot took, over a year. So, they were not really interested in going through the process of rebuilding. They actually still own the lot and they may one day do that. And there's a lot of considerations in that, and we'll get to in a second. But I have to tell this story because it's almost traumatizing in and of itself. So in Kihei, in Kihei, I was listing this beautiful home. It's gorgeous. It was a house in Ohana and they converted into one house. They've added a pool. It's, crystal, granite countertops. It's to a T. And one of the roadblocks in selling it and in any place is people care about the location, 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 location. And while it was beautiful at the end of a cul-de-sac, one of the neighbors was a holdover tenant. In fact, he really was just a squatter. So whenever I would go show the property, people would come over and they'd be like, "This is beautiful. Why is it such a good deal?" And then they'd see the house across the street and they were like, "Oh my gosh." Like roof tiles were missing, there's like abandoned cars in the driveway. And, I got the whole story from the neighbors is the owner there passed away, so his brother was taking care of the property for him, and somebody just moved right on in and started squatting in the property years ago. And this was somebody that is pretty much your worst case scenario. They didn't have a lease, but they claimed that they did. They didn't sign a lease with the brother, the previous owner, or anything like that. And they were able to maintain, that uh, possession of the property for a very long time. They were selling drugs out of the place. They were running a brothel out of the place. They were throwing rocks at the neighbors. I mean, it was a very, very bad situation. So the brother actually worked with, an attorney over those years to try to get them out. The attorney didn't even show up to one of the court cases. So, of course, they got a summary judgment even though they didn't have any kind of standing lease or anything. And it was over a $50,000 worth of legal fees. I was talking, I reached out, I connected with the brother, and I explained, the process of eviction being very difficult. And of course, then the fire happened, we were dealing with it, and there was the moratorium, which made it even more impossible. So they went through a long process. They were getting close to being able to evict the tenant. And then, of course, there was the moratorium, and there was no exceptions that they were able to get. And they just gave up, for the most part. And I said, I can handle this. I've got somebody. So if anybody is looking and having an issue with a tenant like this, there are situations that you can go through. And I was able to help him. And he's like, please, we negotiated, an agreed upon price for it. We were getting rid of the tenant. We had a timeline. Paula and Brian entered under contract with it. Um, they were able to get out. The owner basically reneged on all the agreement, regardless of all the work and the money that I've saved him and the agreement that they had. And he tried to change things. That we brought another agent in, to represent his interests, and which was its own situation. And even that agent was like, "What are you doing?" Like, so he ended up finally selling the property, but they got a good deal. The place was structurally really sound, but lots and lots and lots of cosmetic damage. So you guys want to talk a little bit about that?
I'll let you talk about that. You did more than
Well,
Just briefly, of course.
luckily, this would be like the third house fixer-upper on Maui that we've done over the last 2 decades. So,
Hey, but it's your
um,
only standing one.
yeah,
that's
now
right.
it's our only standing one. So, and luckily, we have somebody like you, a friend who has a construction business. Can I mention them or should I mention them?
Yeah, go ahead. You got
Maven
good people.
Construction. Yeah.
Yeah, tell
So,
us about how you know them and how they were able to.
well, he was the one who fixed up Tiffany's house, the one that you sold Tiffany.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
way
and what's
back
their name
then,
again?
Maven Construction.
Maven Construction. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's a great
Gary
guy.
Mings.
Gary Mings. So they, that's where we originally met him was through Tiffany because she worked with him
Hmm.
on the house and some when she during her business. So when we saw this house and after you showed it to us, which, thank you so much for thinking of us, after we called you after the
Hmm.
fire, wondering how we would rebuild from this.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Um,
Now I called you.
okay, yes, okay, right. After we talked. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
after seeing the house, like I'm not a spring chicken, I'm in my 60s, and it was a lot of cosmetic stuff. It needed a roof, it needed painting, needed a lot of sheetrock repair. Floors were, damaged. The kitchen was, cabinets were toast, just
Termites.
termite, bad.
Yeah.
And the guy who died had been here and left his stuff, and then there had been squatters that rented out to other squatters and a bunch of illegal activity on top of everything that they couldn't sell that had been left in the house, I guess, from the man who had passed away. So
Hmm.
anyway, I looked at the place and I said it can be done, but we've got to, have help. So luckily my friend Gary with Maven Construction, he agreed to, help us get it done because otherwise I'd be working on it for 4 or 5 years, which
Yeah.
at my
And
age,
just so
I'm not that.
everybody's aware of the situation, and just to
Yes,
kind of paint a picture here, I mean, the water had been shut off to the property for over a
yes,
year. The
yes,
electricity had been off at the property for well
yes.
over a year because they have not been paying it and they're crazy like, you know, drug addicts
The,
and things of
the
that nature.
squatters were running off of lanterns and like brought in water.
Yep,
Yes,
basically, when they were
yes,
flushing the toilets, some of which were clogged, and bathing in the shower, they're just, covering themselves, pouring things down the toilet, and it was a disastrous situation, and which is part of the reason they were able to get such a good deal on the property. And
right,
thank goodness, you've got that elbow grease and family help on the island.
right. There was 8 full-size dumpsters of mostly, just garbage and debris taken out of here.
And there
Um,
wasn't a blade of basically living grass on that property.
no,
It was a
no,
desert, as a
yes.
result.
But
But
the
it's
good
it's
news is
So,
all the neighbors love us here
yes,
though, because we got rid of the problem and made the place look better. So that's been really nice.
right. And so my friend Gary, he agreed to help me all the way through the project. So then we decided to move forward and do this. And then, like you said, we had some ups and downs finally getting the house, but we finally got it. And through just the help of community like you said, we're a client, but we're more friends, I
Yeah,
think,
we're like
than
family. We see
clients.
you
Yeah,
every year at the, well, every year you're here for the toy drive and,
right.
have
But
you out
that's
at
how
the,
Maui is, right?
yeah, absolutely.
It's a community, whether we like it or not. And if you can get people to help you, you can get things done. Um, yeah, so we rebuilt the house, took a year to do it. And for months I put in 10-hour days, just fixing bad stuff. Um,
Yeah. And while
now
you are
though,
an
so
electrician, you are
yes,
not a general contractor, which is one of the
right,
reasons why I needed that extra help from friends.
right. So
So
yeah, I know a lot about that. So okay,
And it's looking beautiful now. I got to say, your property has had to have nearly doubled in value with the sweat equity that you guys have put in it. It's a beautiful home. And just to kind of change subjects now back to your lot. So there's a lot of, potential options, whether you're selling the lot, whether you're going to construct on it. And one of the things that I wanted to see if you guys have considered any further was putting those modular homes on it to provide temporary housing. So I know you were discussing it. Where are you at with the thoughts on that property?
Well, we're open to that idea. We spoke with another friend who's an architect about a month ago, I'm guessing, because we had heard some things might be changing on our street, but it turned out not to be true, but we wanted to get down to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he was helping his in-laws with securing a permit for theirs on their property, and he was going to let us know once he got through the process whether it's difficult or not,
Mm-hmm.
because they're actually living on the property in I believe it's a mobile motorhome
Okay.
or trailer type thing without power and water because they haven't been able to get their permit. So he was
Mm.
going to try to get them a permit and see how difficult it is. So that's kind of what's stopping us
Yeah,
at
you
this
want to make
point.
sure it's a down pat process, that it's
Right.
something you can rely on, and then, provide to the community so that as opposed to the lot going unused, you can, provide the necessary housing until other people get on their feet.
Right. But we don't want to go against any county rules and we want to make sure
Hmm.
you can put in solar so that you can avoid the electric, but it's pretty expensive.
So they
So,
have done a fantastic job of streamlining the permitting process, but it is still a process to go through. They use Cloverleaf, which is a actual corporation outside of the county, and there's exemptions to the rules, and they will allow for, oftentimes for a two-story house, you have to be 10 feet away, but older homes were exempt. So they'll offer these exemptions if as long as you're building like what you had previously. So navigating that, going through that, it has its own hurdles. But Kevin, go on.
One of the things that we saw in as the cleanup was being done by the Army Corps of Engineers and their subcontractors is there were brilliant minds, one being David Sellers with Hawaii Off Grid, that came to the county with architectural designs for 5 different styles of units that could be fast permitted. And they put in all of this sweat equity and work to make these designs and try to create a streamlined pathway for homeowners to rebuild following the cleanup. Unfortunately, the county did not streamline their permitting system.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite the undertaking, that's for sure. Um,
yeah.
Being said, at the point we're at, as long as there's a way to go about it, I know that you want to do it. So one of the next shows that we're going to be going and talking about is how to do that, how to best utilize your property. And I've always, of course, been a fan of community land trusts, but they have limited capital. There's only so much that they're capable of doing. And we've talked about that in previous shows as well. Byron, I wanted to ask you a question. So this is also another show that we're going to be doing. Tell me about what you do, the type of loans that you offer, and then some alternative options out there for people in Lahaina.
Well, Lahaina, what we're doing right now is a couple things. We are number one is we're doing the rebuild loans right now, where the construction loans are. We're working on a few people for their construction loans, and we have a few in process. They're just waiting for their permits. The second thing is we're doing the land loans, which are some people have decided to sell to family members or something like that, and then they'll be doing the construction later. So we've been doing that slowly, starting to ramp up because the permits took a while to do. And we are working with, I believe it's Hawaii Community Lending, to figure out how we can help people that may have been underinsured. So that's in the talks right now. I did have a question for Paula and Brian that I was just thinking about. They've had the settlements. Are you applying for this settlement? Because you got your insurance money. There's the big settlement with HECO. Or have you hired an attorney? What are you doing for this right now on the settlement?
We signed up with an attorney, and we're still waiting for it, even though the settlement has been agreed upon. The last meeting we had with the attorney said that now they're going to get down to individuals and they'll hire an outside firm that will determine what your individual award should be. And once you know that, then you can decide if you want to be part of it or not. So we're probably halfway through the process, I guess,
Yeah,
would be my
it's
guess. We
definitely
still
an
have a
undertaking.
ways to go. They hope to have money in our hands before the end of this calendar year, but
That would be a payment too, because they're going to
right,
pay us out over 4 years.
right. There'll be 25% payment up front and then 25% a year after that.
That'll be great. Once that gets settled and addressed, what they'll end up doing, well, most people will end up doing is using that similar to a construction loan. They'll put that
Exactly.
forward and
Right.
they could use the funds to actually build. But until those settlements, well, really disbursements start happening, we're all kind of in a holding pattern to see what happens.
Because if we knew the amount, we could work with that, but we
Yep.
don't know the amount and no one will give us, I mean, the advertisements act like they know, but they don't.
Right.
Nobody
course.
really knows.
You know, I think we'll be lucky to get 50 cents on the dollar. And I
Mhm.
think we're more thinking 25 cents. Um,
But we're hopeful about that.
yes, yeah, because now, as you know, we've used everything, including a FEMA loan, to get the place from you that we're living in now.
Yeah.
So to rebuild in Lahaina, we have to come up with, more money, which I'm disappointed also in the county. We had 3 long-term rentals in Lahaina for years, affordable, long-term rentals for the working class citizens of Lahaina for well over a decade. And we've done it on the mainland too for over 30 years. So I thought after this fire, with the cries for housing, that maybe we would be the ones they helped because we were the ones that, provided long-term affordable housing in downtown Lahaina. Me and Paula, were 2 of those people. We
Mhm.
thought the county would maybe help us, build something back. But so far, like we've mentioned here before, everything we've done pretty much except for the FEMA loan um, has been, out of pocket through friends and family. We've
Yeah.
depleted our savings of, decades being, we've used a lot of that up. So we're hoping the lawsuit will give us back maybe some money and then
Some
maybe
breathing room.
another loan and we can rebuild something in Lahaina because we would like to go back there. We loved living there it was our home. It was, and it's, as everybody knows, it's gone now. So that's where we are now with our lots there. We would love to rebuild, but we just lack the money
Yeah.
right now. We have
And
the
how did you like
resources.
that FEMA loan process, huh? Well, that was
Oh
fun.
my gosh.
Yes. I
There was so
I've been
much
in
uncertainty.
Yeah, I've been in construction, but luckily Paula has been in insurance and bookkeeping for decades. And that's the only way we got through all that stuff. And another thing, we were really lucky, you were talking about earlier, when the fire happened, we were so lucky to be on the mainland for so many reasons. But one of them was right away, we were in contact with our insurance people the next day, where
Yeah.
people here on Maui were just trying to take stock at what had happened. But within 2 days, we were able to start contacting insurance and get that ball rolling. And so we were really lucky there. Paula, like I said, has been in insurance for years, so she was able to deal with that. I don't know how people who, haven't been in this got by.
Yeah.
We even had experience because we had a fire in 2001 at a house that we lived in. Um, Caused by a tenant, but it wasn't really bad. But it made us so we could not live in that house for a year. So we
Yeah.
kind of, we had a little bit of knowledge about things.
We knew
Yeah.
they would give us money but not do anything. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well, and that is oftentimes the most efficient process, by distributing funds to individual people and letting them go out. It can be a much more, yeah, just basically efficient way to go through it. But that's not how government works.
No.
Right.
And as frustrating as what you had to, many other people had far more difficult situations. So I'm really glad that you had family and friends and were available to get you through it. And I look forward to seeing how it goes. I definitely want to do another show with you when we
Okay.
can talk about the payout for you and what you're going to be able to do with those funds. And, it's a difficult decision to whether or not you'll end up selling, that lot in Lahaina because it's been your home for, what, 20 years almost now. And
Getting
it's
close to it.
in long family roots there. It's tough. It's tough. So I look forward to talking more about it with you in a future show. Is there anything
Okay.
else you want to say to kind of wrap up?
Just that I'm really thankful for our friends and family and people like you, Clint, that helped us get through that. Because in the
Mhm.
end, when everybody said no to housing, friends said, come on over, we got room
Yeah.
for you.
We
That kind of
couch
thing.
surfed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah,
and then ended up with an apartment from another friend. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think we'd be here right now.
yeah,
And then you finding this place
right.
also. So,
Yes.
Well, I'm
so it
glad
was
we were
fun.
able to figure it out, and I'll definitely be reaching out to you soon. I hope to see you at next year's Christmas party, and I'll
I
keep
hope we
you.
Well,
see you before
yeah, I hope
then.
we see you before that. Come on
Well,
now.
yeah, I know.
Were you
It's
This
guys
just,
is
at
the
this
same
year's
town
Christmas
now.
party?
But what's that?
Were you at this year's Christmas party?
Yes,
Sure.
yes, we were.
Oh, they had me bartending.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I think I remember
I think I
that.
got some wine from you.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But I just want to say wholeheartedly, Clint, you are great to work with. You are a good person. And if anybody is, needing a good, honest realtor in Maui who is, was born and raised, you're the guy.
Oh, you guys are so sweet. Thank you. I love
Okay.
you.
Love you
And
All
too.
right.
we'll talk soon. I'll be continuing to send you pictures of the fam, and let's get together soon. I want to see your latest update. You're pretty much neighbors now since you're back in, now you're in Kihei.
That's right. We are neighbors.
That's
Okay,
right.
thanks, Clint.
Thank you.
All right.
Aloha.
Aloha. So that concludes the first portion of our show. I wanted to, of course, continue on and talk a little bit more about some current events, as well as actually give Byron the chance to introduce himself now that he's got his camera and microphone working, and I'm sure he'll be able to unmute this time.
I was locked up last time.
Yeah,
My name is
crap.
Byron Yap with American Savings Bank here on Maui. And I'm a Maui resident, born and raised in Hawaii.
All right. So, where do you work? What do you do? And what is going on? Are we going to see some lower rates or what?
Where those
Um,
low rates
well,
at?
well, I don't control them, unfortunately. I'm with American Savings Bank. As far, the Kahului office, we service the whole island. I also work on Maui, Molokai, and Kauai. I do a lot of loans on all those islands. As far as rates, the really key thing is to watch the 10-year bond. That dictates mortgage rates. And everybody says, okay, we'll wait for the Fed cut. That really is only for short-term financing,
And
for
that's a
car
lie.
loans, CDs, and short-term lending. What you have to do is watch the 10-year bond. And right now, it's not doing that great. I mean, it's doing okay. Rates are, a little below 7%. I think with all the changes that are happening, you're probably looking at maybe the end of the year rates starting to come down, or third quarter at the earliest.
Yeah.
But I can see it next year, most likely. That's just my opinion.
It's so interesting too, because everything I read and see says kind of the same BS that, oh, housing prices are increasing and, uh, it's not true. I mean, every time I explain this to people, figures lie and liars figure. So they say, hey, you know, 2025 February, the Maui's median single family home price increased by 8% year over year to 1,400,000 or whatever. That is ridiculous. It is such an abuse of the truth because hey, rich people are still rich and they're buying high-end properties. But the lower end ones are sitting stagnant. The places that need work, there's uh, Maui Meadows had, almost no homes in it a year and a half ago. And then now there's what, well over 16 of them in a relatively small neighborhood, and they're sitting on the market for a while. So there is absolutely opportunities to get a good price on a home. Maui Meadows is definitely not going to be one of the more affordable properties. And the big truth is that there's decreased sales activity year over year. I mean, it dropped by 24% for homes, and condominiums also decreased by 25%. So the overall volume is dropping, and if you look at individual complexes, and that's where you want to see the statistics because you're starting to see a leveling off and a drop off in prices. So, it is great. There's a lot of negotiation power out there, and you've got to put pen to paper and see who's willing to cut a deal on their property. What people should be doing, since there's a lot of inventory available, is negotiate on a price. Get people to sell their home for a much more realistic rate because a lot of these places have been on the market, well over a year. So take that into consideration. Do realize that there's deals that are to be had, but you have to put in the work, and you can get what we like to say is date the rate. So go ahead, get something under contract, and then if and when rates drop, that's the time that you can refinance and get a much more palatable payment. But 7 is a tough number right now.
Yeah, and I
Bob,
think one of the
yeah,
last things about rates, what people are doing, I think creatively, is some of the sellers are helping to pay down the rate. Meaning they give a seller credit. That's been a helpful thing to, potentially you can get it in the low sixes or maybe even the high fives. If the
yeah.
seller's willing to negotiate, and that might be something helpful.
That's right. That's something at no cost to a buyer because what they do is they work it in the negotiation. So what ends up happening is the seller ends up buying down the rate. So that's not like a 30-year buy down. It's usually for like what are your typical buy down periods of time? Like 1 to 3 years?
Well, there could be 1 to 3 years, or it could be a permanent. Example would be, a seller could say, I'll pay 5 points towards your closing cost if they're an owner occupant. The buyer could look at that and say, okay, what would 4 points get me? What rate it would get me? It might get me, low sixes or 5.5% or 5%. It really depends. So
Yeah.
there is options that maybe with the listings that are sitting longer, some of the agents can, present to the sellers and buyers.
And that's something that I've definitely worked with and sent out there into the world. It's important that people realize that those opportunities are available and everything's negotiable. So, if you want to get it done, definitely offer those opportunities and that can help you sell your property. And if you're a buyer, put that forward in an offer. I've done it many times for my buyers and gotten them great financing deals. Kevin, you had a question?
Oh, I had a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to chime in, but I just wanted to let you guys finish up around rates and what's going on with buying points.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I wanted to kind of pass on is tell me a little bit more about the next radio show that we'll be doing with your community lending guy. Why would somebody reach out to them as opposed to working with you? I mean, it's got to be a very specific scenario.
Um, well, they're Hawaii Community Lending. The way I understand it is there to help people to guide them to different mortgage companies for different scenarios. I think they're a nonprofit which is there to, if someone's in a situation where they can't rebuild or credit issues or something. The way I understand it is they're like the liaison to say, hey, we'll direct you to this place or this avenue to go, because their goal is to try to get the people back into their homes, in this crisis time. And so I think what they're doing is great. It's just a matter of just can it work in the real world? I think that's the key thing.
Absolutely. So, let's go on to kind of some more current events. While I mentioned about median home prices and how figures lie and liars figure, there is a lot of persistent economic challenges in the post-wildfire, life that we find ourselves in. UHERO, the University of Hawaii's economic research organization, there's reveals ongoing income, employment, housing difficulties for Maui. residents over the last 1.5 years since the 2023 wildfires. So I do post information like that through my social media. So always go on there if you're curious. But it's definitely an evolving and changing time right now. So it's important that you stay educated and informed about what's happening on our island so that you can see that there really are opportunities out there to buy a house. And I'm glad we're going to be doing that show because, there are, not only people who have dealt with a difficult economic situation of their past, but now from this fire, oftentimes they have a very difficult time maintaining their job that doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of people did lose their job. So their history of employment no longer exists. So that's why, it's important to be educated on these programs that are available. Now, Kevin, what were you going to be saying?
I got a list of things I want to talk about, but as we were
All
talking
right.
about earlier in the show, that with selling the property to Paula and Brian, that there was a squatter in there, and we had talked about the eviction moratorium that was left over from the pandemic era that got extended through post wildfire disaster. Additionally, there was a what's the right word? Uh, Foreclosure moratorium. So the foreclosure moratorium also just ended in February. And so with the combination of the end of the eviction moratorium and the foreclosure moratorium, we're going to see that chaos start to spread into the market as homeowners begin to find solutions, as banks begin to find solutions for, something that may have not have been a great circumstance for any of the parties involved.
Yeah.
And then additionally, in like the current events thing, something that we need to look into a little bit more, but we did hear from a homeowner recently that's rebuilding in Lahaina that there's going to be a mandatory, and the figure I heard, which I have to fact check, is $50,000 archaeological survey before you can start rebuilding, which is a little bit confusing because one of my tenants during the fire cleanup was actually the safety officer for the Army Corps of Engineers that was out here. And they had to work with the archaeological foundations here in Maui as they were doing the cleanup. And so it just seems like there's something going on there that doesn't quite add up. If the archaeological surveys were already done on the property during the cleanup, why do you have to pay for another archaeological survey? And
That's a very good
talking
question.
with Paula and Brian, I wanted to pick their brain if they've encountered that at all with looking at rebuilding, if that's something that somebody has gotten into contact with them or not.
Have you seen that, Brian? Byron, sorry.
No, I've only seen what he said, the budgeting of that for each lot, that there is a requirement for the archaeological. I think they were guesstimating it's 50,000 a lot, and I don't know the reason why behind it. Number one is because there was homes there before, and do we want to put the homeowners through a lot more expense when it's already expensive to rebuild?
Mm-hmm.
I just think there's a lot of in my mind, there's a lot of questions. I mean, maybe they have the right answer, and I just I haven't heard it yet. But it
But
does
that
seem
was
like
already covered by FEMA in the cleanup.
Yeah.
So
When
that's
they
where there's
scraped a lot.
confusion there. Is the
They-
archaeological, they every morning they had a pule, they had the prayer, and they had, as they were doing the cleanup, they had, cultural practitioners, archaeologists supervising the entire cleanup process. And they did get it done quickly. So props for that. However, it could have gone quicker, but with the delicate cultural heritage of our community, they did make sure to do that the right way, and it did get involved in the
yeah.
process. So
That is a bit time consuming. It was every morning and at the end of every day, they had it was a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour at the end of the day, or was it an hour in the morning and an hour at the end of the day?
I thought it was half and half by the time they got up and
Yeah.
running.
So, an 8 hour workday, they're putting about 10 to 15% time to make sure that cultural practices are adhered to and blessings on the start and end of every day. So, yeah, they tried to do everything as right as they could. Um, that being said, I wanted to see if you had any other things that you wanted to discuss because I did shoot you an article that I was kind of blown away. Is it true that they're going to be potentially extending some FEMA housing up into 2026? I was
So
surprised
that
that.
is absolutely true. So
Wow.
FEMA is going to continue supporting individuals that are in FEMA's program. So there's basically two major divisions of that. There's FEMA direct lease housing, where you have these off-island contractors, Lima Charlie, Aesthetic Home Investments, and Fedcology, aka Parliament LLC. They are the ones fulfilling that quote unquote property management role for the FEMA direct housing program. So they're going to extend what we've seen already, especially in our management roster under Aloha Rental Management. We've helped several homeowners get into the program and then manage several properties that are in the program. What we're starting to see is individuals that are wildfire survivors, whether they're from Lahaina or Kula, are starting to get offered in by engaging in various lottery systems for properties that are being rebuilt on the west side. They can take those properties if they win this said lottery. The issue that we've seen happen is it's kind of been take it or leave it. So once you win a lottery, you get a very short amount of notice in order to accept the property and then to move out of the property under the direct housing program and then into another property. And I
Mhm.
believe they still provide assistance for people in those programs. But what we've also seen, which just changed this month, is for tenants, wildfire survivors that are in the FEMA direct housing program, they are now required to start paying a portion of their rent to FEMA. And so they use HUD level metrics to determine that. They look at the individual's income. So there's not like a master number or a typical spreadsheet to really look at because it's really based on an individual basis for households. So those are some big changes that we've seen happening, but it is official that FEMA is continuing to help displaced residents as a result of the wildfires through February 2026.
Yeah, I thought we were only going to be doing another couple of months. So it's good to hear that there's a little bit more runway out there, different programs that are available, and opportunities to continue to situate. People are waiting for their houses to finish construction, and or their longtime family or tenant situation to, get fixed. So I'm glad to hear that there's a little bit, but there's a lot of people who have, of course, moved off the island just because juggling this has been difficult. We actually, as a long-term property management division, it's Kevin's responsible for Aloha Rental Management, which is part of our, family-owned company, Maui Luxury Real Estate. So there, most situations have been relatively smooth, other than the abruptness of, hey, you were leaving, you got basically, another month after we're gone to deal with, a vacant place. So the tough parts of that, some tenants weren't even on island, and they've kind of been bullied out of their place, and they're like, "Oh, you're not here right now," and they're like, "We are gone. We're coming back." So they were fearful that they were going to come back to a vacant place. At the end of the day, they made the decision not to try to fight for it, even though there are resources available. So if you're looking and you need legal help, we can connect you with the appropriate legal hotline to make sure you insure your housing. So if you need something, definitely reach out to us at Aloha Rental Management. We can connect you with that phone number. And then more on our side is we're, of course, helping our homeowners that deal with situations that it takes a little time to get a property ready after somebody leaves abruptly. They'll leave things behind, there's necessary cleaning, and they're like, oh, after the tenant's gone, you have this funds available, but it's or the unit's available and we're no longer responsible. It's like, no, we still have to prepare. There's cleaning, there's repairs, there's removal of tenant items, things of that nature. So how has that been going? I mean,
The onboarding process with getting homes that wanted to participate in the relief for fire survivors became stricter and stricter as the program rolled out. So I believe that it launched in November, December after the fires. Our earliest properties in our portfolio started on January 1st.
mhm.
And as we onboarded more and more properties and the demand started to trickle down as they had this massive push from the community of homeowners that wanted to get in, they became a lot stricter and stricter about what was necessary to be entered into the program.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So,
we the challenge we see now, and it's been about 50-50. So for tenants that have left for one reason or another, they either found housing back on the west side, they won one of these lotteries, or they decided to move off island. For whatever reason, the lease was canceled. We've had about 50-50 where one half is great, where the property was returned in the condition that we submitted it in. The place was professionally cleaned and there was no problem. And then on the other side, they've canceled the lease and the place still has tenants' belongings in it. The place needs to be clean. The damages haven't been addressed. And it was a little bit frustrating and confusing when FEMA, excuse me, was so strict about the process and onboarding and over documenting everything. I mean, we would have tenants move into a property and they would inspect it right before coming over. And if there was a bug on the floor, they said, "Oh, it's not ready for moving." And
yeah,
then coming out of that, when there's damage to the property, there's just uncleanliness because of the situation the tenants are in, where, well, you need to take this other spot and just leave now.
yeah,
These contractors for FEMA, are not really honoring their obligation to return the property in the state that it was given in. And so that's been a little bit tough this last month with dealing with outboarding those properties and working with the homeowners to make sure that some of them need appliances replaced because
yeah.
the appliances were so damaged. It's not something that you can just fix.
And that's really our job. We're there to absorb the frustration and difficulty and time it takes to make sure that the property is returned in the condition that it was given. So I really appreciate the very diligent and difficult efforts that you've been going through for the last, several weeks. Thank you. We couldn't be doing it without your everyday effort.
What's great though is we have wonderful community that we work with as our homeowners, and we're just trying to do right by them. And you make the space and you listen, and we work together and we find solutions.
Yep, absolutely.
There's just not ever a point that I throw my hands up and said this is beyond our control. It's like we can figure this out, and we're very diligent.
So that's basically the time we have for our show right now. Byron's got a meeting to go to. You want to say goodbye first?
Thank you. Goodbye. And Byron Yap with American Savings Bank. It's always a pleasure being on here. I run into people all the time that say we've heard Clint, Byron, and Kevin on the radio. This weekend I was at Home Depot. One of my friends came up to me. "Yeah, I heard you guys on the radio. I never thought he'd listen." So appreciate everybody listening, and thank you for having the opportunity to allow me to speak.
All right, thank you. And Kevin.
Once again, it's Kevin Watkins with Aloha Rental Management. We do long-term rentals, predominantly on the south side of Maui. We do have a couple of two-bedroom apartments coming up in April, and we do have some pet-friendly properties for those of you pet owners out there that have trouble with housing. We do have some stuff in our roster for you coming up. So if you listen to this, Aloha Rental Management at gmail.com, and we are happy to work together with you.
Excellent. And just a little announcement here. We're actually beginning the process to do short-term management. We started the long-term management, Aloha Rental Management, because of the fires. There was a need and we wanted to make sure that people walked through the process and had the hands-on professionals to make sure it gets done. There was not enough people that were focused and determined to get people into housing. So we went out there, reached out to our clients, got a whole bunch of properties together to make sure that housing demand was met. And through that, I've learned that a lot of clients really are so stoked to have us to have this management division that's available, that they've, just been thrilled. So one of the things that we have been working on is doing a short-term management division for those other clients that have bought in vacation rentable condos, in both oceanfront properties and whatnot. So it's going to be coming out. We'll be making our announcement. We're putting all the appropriate software. It's been a long education process over the last few months, and we're hiring a very experienced agent that we'll be announcing in our next one of our next shows. So I look forward to telling you all about it.
She's an
And
absolute gem, and I look forward to working with her and building this division as well. It was a big learning curve for putting together Aloha Rental Management, and I'm not going to spill the beans on what this one's called, but we're really excited to work with our community here to provide these solutions.
absolutely. So I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, and this is Maui Real Estate Radio. Aloha.